going to begin. As you're mulling over all of that and reading the report card, you're probably wondering what that all means, and we will get to it very shortly. So let's take a moment to bow our heads for prayer, please. Father in heaven, we encourage your presence to be with us today again, and we pray that our lives will exemplify your character to others in how we live, eat, drink, and actually in how we share the gospel. We ask this in your name. Amen. So today you have received back kind of an overview of many things. Don Hall developed this a number of years ago, and he has upgraded it in time. And last night, Donnelly and I were ready to call Don Hall and have a discussion with him, because entering this stuff into the computer is exciting, because it originally started with the old operating systems, and the upgrading of that to a menu system has not been a very nice marriage. And so somebody in this group, I commend you for it. I don't know if you're here, has this incredible high level of exercise that you do, and it gave us this error because it doesn't accept over 1,080 minutes of exercise a week. And so we had to go through the whole thing all over again. So when you get into those errors and trying to find the files of people, you're trying to correct this. And so we had a little bit of fun doing that. And but when we got it all done, which we did for you, I think it's pretty accurate. But I want you to be careful in how you interpret that, so we're going to talk about that today. So there were 18 people that filled this out. I think the first day we had 19 or 20. Somebody didn't turn it in right away. So we're going to go over the 18 people and what that report kind of means. So the average Be Healthy score, those are on the second page of that Be Healthy thing on the printout. And it's highlighted with the green highlighter on the top, kind of the top left, down a paragraph or so. That's telling you what your health score is. General health score. 8.39 was the average of this group of 18 people. That is in the cautionary range. Now, am I concerned about that? Maybe. The reason I say maybe is it's kind of a heads up. Maybe we all have a heads up for something on this. The best score, I'm not going to give any names. I told you this would be confidential. I didn't have time to ask people if I could say who it was. It was 12. So that's really very good. The lowest was 5. That's getting kind of below the cautionary. That means you better do some changes, would be helpful. Then you'll see the average number of years that could be added to the life was 8.99. So what that actually means is that if you it tells you on there it could be 10 to 15 years that increases, but the average of this group could increase their longevity by 9 years. Is that correct? Yes, go ahead.
Where is this number, the 8.39?
You won't have the 8.39 because you're going to have your score on there.
Where will we find that score is what I'm wondering.
Your score is on the second sheet of the Be Healthy one. It should be highlighted in green.
So just gives a range. Oh, I see.
Yeah, no, go down a little lower, and it'll give you where you're at, so that there's 3 highlighted areas there.
Mine just has a range, I don't see a.
I will take a time out here and come. If you're mathematically challenged in any way, this can be confusing to you, and I'm not trying to confuse you. So what you're seeing up here on the screen is the average. On your sheet, you're going to see you. Okay? So, Amy, I'm going to use you as an example because you asked me directly, because the next column is going to talk about this a little bit. Some of you are going to have a thing on there that says you are younger than the average age for you. Some of you are going to see that it's older. So just keep reading down that left column to the highlighted areas. So the younger than average, if I took all the people that were younger than average, that average was 2.18. If I took all the people that were older than average, it was above 2 points. So if we have a 60-year-old, and it said on there that they are older by 2.23 or 2.23 years, that means they're 62. If they're younger by 2, they're 58. Now, you have to, I'm giving you the averages so you can see where this group is. We will certainly show you the potential of where you can be with this, but I do not want this to be a self-fulfilled prophecy. Because if you keep reading down there, it tells you when you're going to die. Kind of. But not really, okay? Please understand that and don't misunderstand that. When Dr. Castelli was doing his research in Farmington, Massachusetts, he was determining the health habits of individuals, why people were dying. This was back just, I think, after World War II. He followed all the people in Farmington, Massachusetts, every person there. The unfortunate thing is that when Dr. Castelli could go down the street in Farmington, Massachusetts, and this set the standard for virtually all the health studies that were done since the 1940s, 1950s and 1960s and so on, he could tell within 6 months when that person would die. That's a frightening thought because of them doing this massive health study similar to the Adventist health study, but with everybody in that town. So what did they find out? If you were obese, if you had high cholesterol, if you had high triglycerides, if you did not exercise, if you smoked, if you drank this much alcohol, all of those things were developed by Dr. Castelli, which essentially comes back to the 8 laws of health. But it was delineated much more in depth. So what this is showing you, and do not make this a self-fulfilled prophecy, you look at it and say, well, I'm 75 years old and it says I have 1 year to live. Don't look at it that way, Do not look at it that way, because you do not want that to be. What this is intended to be is to be a motivator that you can improve with what is actually going to come as part of your life. Now, I noticed many of you checked off at the bottom, we would like more information on this. The thing that came up with that pretty frequently was fitness level and brain health, and there was a number, of course, with stress. Stress is going to be discussed this week in fairly good detail. So is burnout, so is depression, and so is anxiety. You're going to have tests for absolutely every one of those. So with the food one that you did, that is from the Northwest Territories, there are limitations on that. Every test has its limitations, and some of the limitations on that I found were, it doesn't really tell you how much you're eating, because you shouldn't probably eat more than 80% of being full. So some people say, well, I'm eating right, and Donnelly's going to talk about the dietary stuff. But in that particular part of it, you could be eating the right food, but eating way too much of it. If you eat way too many nuts, you're not going to go nuts. You're going to get big. That's just the reality of it, okay? All of those things are part of this. Some of the one question really befuddled your minds for some of you, and I had trouble with it because I've gone through these questionnaires. Fish and beans, and you're like, well, they're considering that a protein, right? And so are you eating too much protein, not enough protein? The keto diet is like, we're going to give you as much fat as you can. That's maybe not the best, because I've seen people get into some pretty big trouble with that as well. So we're going to start with some of this. So your current age is listed, as is your potential age. And again, don't make this your own life expectancy. It shows the average, and Newfoundlanders have about a 2-year lower life expectancy than the rest of Canada. Why is that? Again, they said that part of that happened when the cod fishing thing died. Things started to go negative, but were there other reasons, and are there other reasons for it? Probably, there are. They're difficult to kind of corner and figure out, but they are there. And so we want to change that. We want Adventists to be the healthiest people on the planet. And we have the blue zones and the Adventist blue zones and so on. So, and we want you to have a fulfilled and positive life. So let's talk about exercise and what this is going to mean. In Isaiah 40:31, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I'm kind of waiting for that day when Ken took us for a hike yesterday. This guy is crazy. He's fit, and I appreciate that. I appreciate a conference president who is fit. He was out there just chugging along ahead of us, and we're gasping behind him trying to keep up with this guy. I don't know if he does that in the office, but if he does, got to go with the flow, right? This is a really interesting Bible verse, and I don't want you to get into it too much because people say you're misinterpreting this. But Elijah, he ran the equivalent of about 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers to get away from Jezebel. And then he had to walk a day into the desert after that. And what has happened after that? He ended up getting fed, and he needed water. So there's all kinds of things going on in that Bible verse, because we also talk about the fact that as we get into the depression part, he was seriously depressed. And we'll talk about how to deal with that from a standpoint of you with somebody else. So let's look at some of the common components of exercise. The ability to carry on your daily activities in a comfortable manner and have a reserve energy for fitness and emergencies. So look at what you have up here. Prepare for the unexpected. That is the thing we always talked about in fitness. It's one thing to be able to cover this situation from day to day, but do you have enough energy for the emergency? Do you have enough fitness for the emergency to get you through to that next point? It's muscular strength, muscular endurance, it's cardiovascular endurance, it's flexibility, it's balance, and body fat composition. So men, no more than 17%, and women, no more than 24%. We've tested people that I think men were around 7% body fat. You have to have some body fat. That's getting very low. They were triathletes. The average man has 18 to 24, and the average woman is 25 to 31. So that the average is above where we should be. Of course, obesity in North America is at an all-time high. So the benefits are it controls stress. It improves your immune system. So for instance, the mitochondria in the cells, every time you exercise, the mitochondria are the power parts of your cells. And every time you exercise, that increases. And it really is important for exercise for all of these components. I had a professor at the University of Colorado working on my PhD there, and his name was Fred Cash. He was probably the originator of the real fitness regime. We all think of Ken Cooper being that way back from Dallas, Texas. Fred Cash was miles ahead of this guy. And I was in a class with him one day at the University of Colorado, and one of the classes I had to drop, and I said, I'd like to audit it. He says, no, just keep coming. I'm not even going to charge you for it. He said, just keep coming to class. He said that we have our 4 components, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional, mental. And he said, the most important of these is the physical, because it affects the spiritual so much. But he says, remember, the spiritual is at the top. So that's where everything enters first. So make that a key element of all that you do. This is coming at a public university, and I said, thank you, Dr. Cash. I said, it's amazing that we need to take care of the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the social. It keeps you more alert. It balances your appetite. It really does. And it lowers high blood pressure. So HDL is the good cholesterol. It's the high-density lipoproteins or lipoproteins. LDLs is the low-density lipoproteins. Those you want to be low. The ratio, you want to have the ratio correct with this. And interestingly enough, you've read all these reports of people saying that you should drink a little bit of wine, or you should do this or that because it's good. The red wines are supposed to be good for you. So there was a study that came out a number of years ago, and this study fortunately has been put to bed, and maybe lower than the bed, buried somewhere. One of the alcohol companies in the US said, we're going to do a little bit of a study on this as well. And they said it's okay to have a high LDL because alcohol itself was raising LDLs, the bad cholesterol. That study determined there were actually two types of LDLs that they never knew there were before. And they hid that in the study very well. And they found out in the end that the low density lipoproteins, you do not want that to be high. But exercise and fiber in the diet increase your HDL, which you want to be good because they are the dumping ground for the LDLs. They get rid of the LDLs. And so that fiber and exercise are something to do with that. So fiber in the diet, that does not include meat, as you think it's fibrous. Doesn't cut it, sorry. It is the vegetables. It's the fast food I mentioned yesterday. You know what I mean, right? The fruits, the vegetables. There's nothing faster than that. Okay, if done outside, this does give you some vitamin D, which is very important. It helps control weight. It's fun and social. It improves mental health. We'll get into that more in a couple of days. These are Mayo Clinic research on this. It combats health condition and disease such as stroke, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes. I can give you many examples of individuals who have diabetes, and diabetes is just rampant. It is going crazy. People who would just start by walking right after they eat is critical for a diabetic. And when you walk, get the arms up, because this starts to increase the circulation, digestion, and knocks the blood sugars down. Even a 10-minute walk can make a huge, huge difference. And it helps a lot with just your mental attitude to get out and do that. Depression, anxiety, many types of cancer, arthritis, and falls. It's one of those things that you just want to really keep moving. So how to get started with this? Get medical clearance if you feel that that is necessary. I think Hulda Crooks was the one that could hardly walk out down the driveway, and then she climbed Mount Whitney into her 90s, which is over 14,000 feet, which is an amazing feat for a woman who was basically, her husband died before she did, and he told her, you need to get out and exercise. And she would do Mount Whitney, and everybody would join her because she was doing it in her 70s and 80s. How many? Over 20 times she did it, I think. And, oh, can I carry that for you? Can I walk with you? Because there's now a peak in that range in the Sierras that's named after her. It's amazing. This little Adventist lady who did the research for Dr. Mervyn Harding at Loma Linda. I'd go into Dr. Harding's office, and there she would, how can I help you today? I'm like, I didn't know you worked here. Oh, I do the research for him. I'm like, oh, you are a walking research lady. She really was. She was amazing. Don't overdo it. Start slow, because it can get pretty discouraging. You can get pretty sore. You start doing steps, you start doing things like that. It makes a difference. Do something you enjoy and something you will learn to enjoy given enough time. Keep track. An old-fashioned paper, watch, phone, I don't care how you do it, just keep track of it. So I'm going to mention something here because it has become, it's funny how certain things have tipping points. And we are so used to the 10,000 step thing. If you get your 10,000 steps a day, this is cool. This is got it made, right? Do you know how that started? There was a company in Japan that had been kind of told they wanted, it was at a workplace, they said, can you develop a thing that'll actually count people's steps and will make this 10,000? That's where it started. It had nothing to do with scientific research at all. Nothing. Now, having said that, is 10,000 steps a good number? Yes, it is. It actually works out to be a reasonable number. When we were hiking with our daughter in Europe here a few months ago, we've been doing 10 to 12,000 steps a day, She doesn't know how to stop. She doesn't own a vehicle. She owns a bicycle and walks. We were averaging 17,000 steps a day. That means we were up at 24,000 some days, and we were like, whoa, man, the bed feels good tonight. Like, it was unbelievable. And it makes a huge difference if you are kind of prepared for some of that emergency setting. And someone to keep you accountable is a great way too, you know. Donnelly's got it on our watch. I've got it on the phone. And some days we're like, did we do this? Things get tricked with this. If you're cutting the lawn or driving the ATV around or something like that, it'll make it look like you're doing a lot of exercise. Or you're riding horse. The horse is getting the exercise. Okay, you probably aren't. I want to take a moment to talk about walking sticks. So, when I was doing a master's in public health at Loma Linda, I did a 3-month project in Europe. We visited about 8 or 9 health centers. That was to see how they operated, the administration of them, and invariably, this was back a while ago. That was long before I retired, just when I was starting out. They would not, virtually none of them would do any exercise, walking or anything without walking sticks. And I asked them about that. And they said, they looked at me kind of dumbfounded like, what do you mean? I said, well, why are you using it? They said, well, that's the only way to exercise. You need to have walking sticks. Because, and in a research thing, you know, you mentioned you do a lot of cross-country skiing when you could. The highest VO2, oxygen uptake, that is the best utilization of oxygen that's been tested on the planet, was done on cross-country skiers, distance cross-country skiers, Olympians, scoring around 96. The average heart attack patient on a VO2 max is around 29. The average distance runner is around 48. These cross-country skiers and really, really high-end athletes are well into the 90s. And they contributed to the fact that they're using the upper body muscles as well. So this is going to increase grip strength. It also improves your coordination. It also keeps you from falling, and it decreases knee strain, hip strain. And you can ward off the dogs. It gives you something to play with. When we brought those walking sticks back from Europe, we wrapped them because they were not collapsible like this. They were just hazelnut ones that we still have at home, hazelnut trees. We wrapped them up, and we had to come back through customs, and they said, what's wrapped in the sleeping bags? We said, walking sticks. What? I said, what? Just walking sticks. Yeah, okay, go ahead, no problem. So the reason I mention this particularly is you can do other things with this because it helps with the stretching. If you want to use this for something else, you can go with one, switch hands. It keeps the swelling down in the fingers dramatically. We've hiked huge sections of the Pacific Crest Trail, which runs from Mexico to British Columbia. The individuals that we'd hike with that did not use walking sticks invariably were hiking with their hands above their heads like this, because we were starting to cut circulation from the backpack. Those with walking sticks, no problems. These major muscles, biceps, triceps, even starting with the deltoids, these are all things that are improved significantly with a walking stick. And if you get, you know, I'm not here to promote anything. You can take the rubber thing off. There's a carbon steel tip on this that you can use if you need to poke it in the ground or whatever.
So this is good for like sidewalks and rock
Yeah, this is good for sidewalk, what we did yesterday, Ken, this is great for that.
But the other could be like for, more dirt or.
Yeah, if you want more dirt, gravel, stuff like that. So these easily go into our
Watch your quarter.
checked bags.
So do you use just one or do you use two at the same?
We always virtually use two. The handicap with this is if you like doing photography like we do, it gets to be a pain because you got the sticks, so sometimes we'll just take the one. They are very good at stabilizing what you do. Now, having said all of that, these are different lengths. They should be adjusted or bought so that you are at about 90 degrees here. If it's cross-country skiing, you want it about under the armpits. If you're doing skate skiing, you want it up at the top of the shoulder, but it all depends. And if you're downhill skiing, it's even just a little bit lower. But for walking, that's the 90 degrees that you want. And probably 80% of the people don't use these straps correctly. Use them for a very good reason. You come into the bottom from them and drop this into the palm. Because that way you actually still have it on here. So when you walk forward, you can push on that. Otherwise, what's happening is you're gripping on this and you're doing what we call an isometric exercise. Isometric means there's no motion. Isotonic. You're doing an isotonic exercise instead of an isometric exercise. This becomes isometric, so there's movement. And you keep the hand moving. So you can relax. Otherwise, it's like I can't drop the stick. So I have nothing. I'm not selling anything here because you can't have these. And it took us a fair bit of research to find out the best ones. I know a physician who. These aren't necessarily the best. I mean, you can get carbon fiber ones that are going to cost you $300. You don't need to do that. Other ones will cost you $40, $50 online. You can probably get them for $20. And there is a right and a left because they will be oriented.
So we write it on here so we don't forget.
And it's on the strap, but that usually gets hidden under the hand. So get a good grip on them. Like you don't want something that's going to be slippery when it's sweaty. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you can walk diagonally or parallel. So go with two at a time. That's a parallel walk.
You'll notice I'm not going every step, but we can. So, pretty relaxed. If I want to go every step, then I'm going like this. If I'm going every step, it's like this. I'll come up to the front. So it depends what kind of exercise you're doing. Okay, but if you're going fast and you really want to go, then you're going like this. Okay, if you want to relax a little more, you're going with 2 steps for everyone to go forward. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to, or you're tired, so you just go like this. Or you're going up a hill, and so you're trying to help us go up the hill. You'll use both hands at the same time, like this.
If we have a long downhill, we will probably lengthen them a little bit to put ahead of us to brace.
Or shorter.
Or shorter if it's all uphill.
Uphill,
Right.
because these become really quite long.
And you can go cut a willow tree, it doesn't matter. Anything works. We've got all kinds of them at home, and yeah, as long as it's solid.
So are you giving us the brand name of that one?
This brand name is Black Diamond. I had a physician that actually developed one of these with a pulley system inside as a walking stick because people dislocate shoulders on trails, and you could use that to relocate the shoulders. It is pretty amazing. That is a black diamond. So black diamond is what the best brand we found at the time, but
There's lots,
Lecky,
you want to feel what's good. This
yeah,
has a little bit of shock in it.
yes, which is nice. The shock is right at the top.
Yeah. But there's some that are carbon fiber, like you said, much lighter than this. So I think I might go with that next time.
They lighten your wallet quite a bit too.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yes.
It's also acting a little bit like a weight, right? So you're getting a little bit of weightlifting at the same time.
Truly does help your knees and your toes going downhill. You do, I guess depends what kind of hiking you do. If you do Newfoundland doesn't have any flat ground. I don't think so. You're good. You can. It does. Okay. We sure didn't find that on Fogo Island. Okay. So my point is, do something. I don't care if you swim, paddle, climb, ski, garden, lift, stretch, bend. Don't rust out, wear out. It's the better way to go. I've developed a little bit of arthritis over the years through some of my spine. And I was into the doctor the other day and she says, "You are the youngest guy for your age." I know. I said, "Well, that's a good news," but I said, "I still have arthritis." She says, "Just keep going." She says, "What did you do for a living?" I says, "Oh, ice climbing, mountaineering, anything outside." "Oh," she says, "that explains probably why you have some of the arthritis, but don't quit now." She says, "Because if with arthritis, if you don't do anything, it just seizes up and it gets worse." 20 to 30 minutes per day, 3 to 4 days a week. Some of you are over the top of this. That's good. That's kind of the minimum. And you can't hoard this. You have to keep moving. You can't store this. You know, it's a little bit like Bible study. You got to do it daily. You know, it's okay to have a day of rest. That's no problem. Overload is good. Progress from one level to another. Be regular. It can be split through the day. You can do some before breakfast, some after breakfast, some at night. They recommend mornings just because you tend to get energized with exercise and may not sleep as good. Be specific in what you're going to do. Get the heart rate up. You know how to take the pulse. We talked about this. And we talked about the 10,000 steps. So if you're moving, you're not losing, so keep moving. This is Donnelly. Actually, you guys probably know where this is. It's where all the trees fell over there back behind the cabins we hiked through here last time. You think you've got reasons. They're probably excuses that you don't want to do it. We didn't care really about the weather. That, again, is Donnelly hiking here in Newfoundland. And then, of course, we did go to the Four Corners of the Earth, which is on Fogo Island. We found the edge of the earth, and we came back. And there's a big sign between Edmonton and Lacombe that says, "We are the Flat Earth Society." I'm like, well, I guess you can get away with that in Alberta. And you guys can get away with the edge of the world in Newfoundland. But so far, I haven't found it all out. So keep moving. Water, we're going to just talk about that briefly here. This is a job that we did in northeast Brazil. The water was killing the people. It was so bad they were getting stomach cancers, killing the kidneys. It was horrible. And so we built cisterns for them. Well, you can see the water. That's how they carried the water. And you can see the water on the bottom left. That maybe those lights could be out, I guess. But that is pretty bad water. And so you want to have good drinking water. Another project we did in Laos, they did not have water for a 1,500 student school. And we had to trench about 1 kilometer to get that water. And you can see we had the water coming out of that tap that we built that reservoir for them and laid the line for them. Pure water is really important. I bring this up because at high altitudes, you say, well, we don't have high altitudes here. That not too many people just stay in one place anymore in the world. So high altitude, even on an airplane. Airplanes are usually at about, they're pressurized to about 7,000, 7,500 feet. This is why they get nervous about taking people that are heart attack patients on flights unless they pressurize them properly. You dehydrate very quickly once you start to go up in altitude. And so this is why you should drink lots of water on a plane. I know going to the bathroom on a plane is a pain in the neck, but we found the dehydration plus the exercise to be rather challenging at this altitude because our oxygen uptake, our oxygen saturation was extremely low at 17,000, 18,000 feet. This was taken in 2018 in Tibet. Whoever drinks the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring water welling up to eternal life. So this water is mentioned 722 times in the Bible. Now, a lot of this has to do with spiritual part of it, but our water floats in brain. Our brain floats in a lot of water. We have to have the water there. I just talked to a guy at the Alberta camp meeting last week when we were there, and he said, I got heat stroke. I said, why? I mean, it seems obvious. He said, because I just didn't drink enough water. And so heat stroke is a true medical emergency. It is like botulism. If you do not do something about it, they're going to die. And his mental function just went out the window. And so you need to drink. Thank you, Dennis, for grabbing that water bottle there for yourself. Do you know the rule of threes for survival? Have you ever heard of these? Any thoughts? Okay, so where is water listed? Well, it's not number one. It clearly is not number one. In the rule of threes, the 3 seconds after the situation occurs, whether it's an accident or a survival situation, is the will to live. If people give up, it is horrible. It is hard, and I've taught survival classes for years. It is amazing what happens to them when they just do not want to carry on anymore. 3 minutes we need air, 3 hours we need shelter, 3 days we need water. You're going to be in a bad way in 3 days. That is kind of the max where you're at with this. 3 weeks we need food. 3 months we need companionship, social, and if we make it 3 months we will live. But pretty much people want social interaction within those 3 months. So it bathes the cells, it thins the blood. 1 to 2 glasses of water when you wake up is really critical. It carries nutrients to the cells, it flushes the bacteria from the bladder and the body. Don Lee does the whole internal, external hydrotherapy stuff. I won't get into the external much here. It prevents constipation. 5 glasses a day to reduce heart disease, a minimum. So the secret is out that some of you are not drinking enough water. You put it on there. I'm not going to say who you are. You know who you are. If you're drinking 2 or 3 or 4 glasses of water a day, it is insufficient. Just 5 helps reduce heart disease. And doing this in the morning, it aids digestion, prevents constipation, normalizes blood pressure, cushions the joints, and helps for headaches. Delivers oxygen to the body, boosts healthy skin, weight loss, yes, reduces urinary tract infections, and you as an adult are about 65% water, therefore hydrate. It lubricates the eyes, protects organs and tissues, regulates normal body temperatures, maintains electrolytes. You can overdo this, cools the body. If it is overheated, necessary for optimal brain function, reduces stress on the kidneys and helps reduce possibilities of kidney stones. If you are a high protein eater, you better drink a lot of water because it's really going to be hard on the kidneys. If you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. Drinking too much water can have detriments if you have thyroid disease, kidney, liver, or heart problems, and of course, we know of deaths that have happened from people drinking too much water. Gradually throughout the day with sips is better than the big gulps, and we talked about higher elevations and heat. So low water, dehydration is a problem. This is the pinch test we've had to do on people because I used to teach first aid, international and wilderness first aid. If you pinch the skin and it just kind of stays in this tent position, you are seriously dehydrated already. And you should be, that should just return back to normal. It's like I used to tell the students, I said, your pee has to be clear. If it's yellow, start drinking more water. If it's brown, drink a lot more water. If you hear a tinkle and it sounds like stones are coming out, you are in serious trouble. You better start getting some intravenous or something like that. It helps with low blood pressure, dizziness, confusion. So out of a sample of these 3,397 adults, 7% of the adults reported no daily consumption of drinking water. 0. 36% of adults reported drinking 1 to 3 cups of drinking water a day. 35% of adults reported drinking 4 to 7 cups. And 22% of adults reported drinking 8 cups or more. So you do not want to get this in the form of other juices and so on. You actually want to get good, great, clear drinking water. Newfoundland water tastes pretty good. Alberta water, not so good. We're totally full of all kinds of petrochemicals there. So the bottom line is taking care of yourself is necessary for good health. So Donnelly, tell them what to eat. Any questions? Okay, Brian, we're just shifting gears here for a second.
Question.
Yes.
Often you'll taste in water chlorine. Any studies to show what the long-term effect is of taking chlorine in your water?
There are some studies that have dealt with chlorine, and the normal municipal drinking water is probably not a problem in most places and for most people. Having said that, if you can actually get the chlorine out of that, you're probably better off. Now, having said that, you do not necessarily want to drink water that does not have chlorine in it in certain environments, because you're probably going to get stuff that I got overseas that I don't ever want to have again. And so you really have to kind of weigh that out. We were doing a project in Swaziland, drove through South Africa, and we stopped at a town there to spend the night. And they said, in this hotel, you will have the best water that you ever drank in your life. And I thought, I don't know about that. That is the best water I ever drank in my life. It was the most incredibly pure tasting sweet water. When they talk about the Exodus and tasting that sweet water, that was it. I don't know where they got it, but it was great. So I can't totally answer that question. It will dissolve to a certain extent. Carbon filters helps that. You can even purify water by letting it sit in a clear plastic container in the sunlight. It'll kill the germs in there. the problem is that you're going to have some leaching out of the chemicals from the plastic.
But if that's all you have.
But if that's all you have, it's like with food that she's going to talk, and it's like with water that I've told our students in classes. You take the best food and the best water that's available to you. People say, well, will you eat this and this and this at this point in time in your life? I said, whatever the best food is available to me, whatever the best water is available to me, that's what I will use. We carry water filters. We carry iodine to purify water.
That's around the world.
But that's around the world. That's not in Canada. Although, the first night we spent in Newfoundland a few years ago, I drank the water out of the tap, went into this this Airbnb thing, and didn't think anything of it. Then we went to put some stuff in the fridge, and the sign was on the fridge, not the tap, that said, "This water is not good to drink." And right away, psychologically, you're sick.
What do I use? What do I use to change it?
That one.
This one?
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, what your take is on like, getting your water from a spring that may be somewhere nearby as opposed to like having a water distiller distilling your own water?
Oh, man,
Is there one above the other that?
I'm not sure.
The only issue with Mineral Springs water that I am aware of is that if the mineral content is too high, or if there's too high of a sodium content in it, then be cautious of it. So have it tested to see. Our water at home is not healthy for us. It'll ruin our kidneys, so we have to distill it or use a filter. What about distilled water? I've asked professionals on this from time to time, because some say it leaches all the minerals out of the system, and others say it doesn't. Ellen White has a bit of a statement that has been somewhat retracted as far as drinking soft water, which is a little different than distilled water, okay? So there doesn't seem to be a lot of good evidence. I asked Fred Harding about this, and he said there's not a lot of good research telling you that you should not drink distilled water. And there's not a lot of good evidence that you should not, if the water does not have any destroying microbes in it, that you shouldn't drink spring water.
Yeah, because we were drinking like water from a spring, but I was always worried like, what if there's like parasites or something?
Well, if there are parasites in it, you probably know.
You would know already.
You would know already. You would be running to the toilet, or you'd be vomiting, or you'd be doing this. Like I got a parasite in Peru. Took 7 years to figure this out. 53 doctors could not figure it out. I lost 22 pounds. And boy, that was a nightmare. And I knew I had it, but they sure didn't know which one it was.
The government tests a lot of these springs, maybe.
Yeah.
They do.
Exactly.
They do. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, we ended up going with the distiller we got on Amazon afterwards, because I did read some of the things Ellen White says on water, and it, like it seemed, and I've also heard that you'll get your minerals from your food, so.
you will. You will.
Distilled water shouldn't,
Yeah, you will get the minerals from the food. For instance, if you're low on B12, it's best to absorb it under the tongue, because you only have about,
Or the drops.
and use the drops, because you only have about this much of your intestine that's going to absorb vitamin B12. So you have to gauge those minerals within the food, as she's going to talk about, this wide variety of stuff that you're going to have, that will help to boost those minerals if you are drinking distilled water. And we mix up our water. We'll get some mineral spring water and distilled that we drink at home.
Okay,
question.
so we're actually supposed to quit now, but I'm going to go very quickly. We go to 12. Oh, okay, so one more question then.
We were told by health people some years ago not to take water with our meals, and for me,
I can talk about that.
it changed everything. Like, I stopped doing, that, and then I was forgetting to take in water during the day, because when you're almost 60 years old and you start to change your
dangerous stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't always go back to the old ways, and,
Don Leo talked
Well, I'll
about
talk a
that.
little bit about the water with the meals. That's probably a very good question. Part of the reason why it's not good to drink a lot of water with the meals is because it's diluting the food, okay? And the stomach is trying to digest stuff. So if you have a lot of liquid, then the stomach acid has a harder time digesting the food. So the food is going to sit in the stomach longer. Therefore, you're going to have a little more indigestion more often. Okay?
I understood that, but
Yeah.
if you're not getting your water then, and infects other things.
I know, it's true. So, yeah, person needs to kind of figure it out. What works and what works for some people works different for others. Yeah, everybody's not exactly the same. But one thing I should mention also about ice water. You know, a lot of times we'll go to a restaurant and they say, "What do you want to drink?" And you'll say, "I have water," and they bring you a big glass of ice water. That's one of the worst things to do with your meals because now your stomach has all the liquid, plus it's very cold. So your stomach has to actually warm everything up, has to get enough acid in there to digest things. And so if you've ever wondered why after you eat at a restaurant and you've had all that water plus all that fat and extra salt and everything, and you feel kind of a lot of indigestion or bloating, that's why. Because your food is actually starting to rot. Basically, it's starting to rot in your stomach before it has a time to digest. So leave the water out, or if you need a little water with your food, just don't keep gulping it down, just keep adding some. Yes?
I've heard it recommended that you should drink your water as soon as you come out of the bathroom. So if you go to the bathroom, replenish when you come out of the bathroom.
That's a good idea. It helps you remember it. Yeah, a good idea too. So for those that might not hear if they're watching online or something, so the recommendation is, as soon as you go to the bathroom, drink more water. Okay, it helps remind you. The only thing is, if your body isn't used to it, you have to go to the bathroom again in 10 minutes. So be careful. You know, it takes your body a little time to get used to it. Okay, so my goal is here, because we're doing this part before lunch, is to get you really hungry for some fruits and vegetables. Okay, so I'm not going to get too detailed. Everybody kind of knows a lot about nutrition and the importance of things. But I thought it would be kind of fun to go through some of this stuff to make it interesting for you. And we'll do specifically a few specific things. So what color are your groceries? So I got this article off of Vibrant Life or Vibrant Health magazine a long time ago. And I've kept it because I used it in school. And of course, your foods haven't changed. You know, foods still have those particular phytochemicals in it. So what are phytochemicals? Okay, they're the plant chemicals, the natural substances in our food that protects against the effects of aging and disease. Well, that sounds pretty good. And we know we need to eat anyway, right? So, but different foods are going to be better for us than others. So I want to tell you that most of these pictures in this presentation are ours. Okay, so they're either from stuff from my garden, or they're going to be from Bhutan on these particular ones, or from Jordan. Okay, so some of those countries have amazing foods, and wherever we go around the world, we always like to go to the markets because we like to take pictures of the foods, and we like to buy the foods, and we like to eat the foods that are there. So what's interesting about red? So when you go to a grocery store, you should try to buy as many of your vegetables and fruits, lots of different colors. Now, you don't have to have all the colors every day, but just make sure you're buying lots of different colors, okay? So in this article, they talked about radical reds. So we have in our body free radicals, and that's unstable oxygen molecules. They're associated with disease and aging and whatnot, okay? So the red phytochemicals, they actually zap the free radicals. They are the ones that really work on getting rid of them. So free radicals are associated with the growth of cancer cells. So for instance, lycopene, okay, that is, a lot of that is in tomatoes, okay, and that's linked to a lower risk of prostate cancer, okay, so free radicals, radical reds, okay, this is lots of tomatoes from our garden, okay. Now when we talk about blue, now I know this is lots of berries, and berries are in particular especially good for you, but the blue ones have a real special case for us, okay? So blueberries especially are prized for the antioxidant activity. So if it's antioxidant, that means it's going to fight disease, okay? And it protects against age-related memory loss and declining motor skills. So we try to have some blueberries every day if we can, because if that's going to help us with memory loss, well, that would be nice to have memory loss happening way later in our age, okay? So not a bad idea to make sure that you have lots of berries and blueberries in the mix. Purple, again, same idea. It's along the line with blues, okay? This one picture is in Jordan. Look at the size of those grapes. Isn't that amazing? We really enjoyed looking at and actually tasting some of those fruits and vegetables that we had there. Okay, what about purple? Okay, this was in Bhutan at a market garden there, okay? So another, again, just all the different colors. To me, it's just so amazing. If you go in our farmers markets in Canada, same type of thing, like look at the variety of things, okay? Or just even the grocery store, there's so much variety. Just really go for it. What about greens? Okay, greens are important. Somewhere I have the note for why greens are important, but I'll find it soon. This one, the greens are, spinach, kale especially, have lutein, and it's linked to the prevention of blindness and improved vision, okay? Beans and peas, they have plant chemicals linked to lower cholesterol and cancer prevention. So there's lots of things to look at. What about orange and yellow? Sometimes we think, well, why should we bother with an orange? It just has vitamin C. By the way, did you know that apples have more vitamin C than oranges? We always thought that oranges should have everything that we need, right? But apples are very good too. So sometimes just these common, simple fruits that we say, oh, well, I've just been eating them, I'm tired of them. No, keep eating them. They're still really good for you. Oranges, even though they have less vitamin C than apples, they rank the top 20 fruits and vegetables for antioxidant ability and contain more than 150 phytochemicals, the chemicals that are good for our bodies. That's just in an orange, okay? Oranges and yellows, this is peaches actually from Bhutan. And orange foods are linked to maintaining vision, preventing cancer, and even warding off the common cold. Okay. Yellows, these bananas are also from Bhutan, or these bananas rather, okay? Bananas, again, very good for a person. Lots of different things in there. And some people, it actually, if they would just had a banana for supper, they would do a lot better than eating all the foods that we're eating. Or an orange for supper, okay? So we have to think about what are we eating, but also when are we eating it, okay? So if we're eating a lot at supper, and our body has to start digesting that, but then we go to bed, and then it's trying to digest plus sleep, it helps us gain weight very quickly, actually. This is some tomatoes and corn from our garden, which we are, not this year, this was last year, totally excited about this corn from our garden. Because for many years, we've tried planting corn, and maybe 3 or 4 plants would come up, and maybe we'd get 1 or 2 or 3 spindly little corn. But for some reason, I don't know what's happening to the weather system, but for some reason, for the last couple of years, we've had really good corn. And there's a lady that plants her garden, part of her garden in with us. We've given her some space. And so she came by and she said, I overestimated, she's a single person but loves gardening and loves eating all her food. She says, I've overestimated the amount of corn that I thought I should plant. And she'd bought one of those big bags of corn. She ordered that online. And she soaked the whole package. She probably only needed a quarter of the package, but she soaked the whole package. Well, once you soak the seeds, you better plant them, right? So she said, would you like the seeds? We said, sure. Well, we'd already planted some corn. So we planted this corn. We had how many rows? We must have had 6 or 7 rows of corn. And we had about 150 ears of corn. It was just pollen me. So we had lots of people over and had corn roasts and had the students over and had more corn roasts. Like plus I froze some corn. Like I have so much corn in the freezer from last year, I don't need to plant corn again this year. But it's really exciting to plant something and get it out of your own garden. Now, brown is better, right? Okay, so when we look at brown bread versus white bread, okay, so you know the story on the white bread, okay, so someone took the white bread, they took everything out of it, and then they take like 14 or 15 things out of it that are good for you, they put 4 of them back, and they say, this is enriched bread. I don't know how that happened, but it's enriched, okay? So also think about your whole wheat bread that you buy in the store. If it's really soft and there's not much to it, like you could squeeze it up in a ball and it would be about this big, that isn't particularly healthy for you either because it doesn't have that much brown flour or whole wheat flour in it. And as you know, some people can't handle wheat or things with gluten, okay? So sometimes you have to think about eating in a different way. Some people just don't like bread. It's so dry. Or we put things on bread that, you know, we stack it with the peanut butter and the jam or the thick margarine or butter to get it down, right? So maybe it's not the best to eat bread all the time at every meal, okay? We have to think about rice also. How many of you cook with brown rice? You don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you use brown rice over white rice? If you use the parboiled rice, that pretty much doesn't have very much nutrients in it. If you use instant rice, you might as well be eating cardboard, okay? The parboiled is so refined. Parboiled, you know what parboiled means? It means that they boiled it, and then they dehydrated it so that it boils up a little bit faster for you. Okay, plus they took all the husks off and everything. So it's really not that healthy for you. So the brown still has all the husks on like your whole wheat and that kind of thing. So brown is definitely a way to go, but study into it a little bit to understand how that works the best for you. Now, white is good in some instances, like garlic and onions, cauliflower, parsnips, celery, I guess, could sort of be under the white, okay? Tofu, okay? Tofu has isoflavones, and it protects against breast cancer and prostate cancer, and it helps lower the cholesterol. Onions and garlic have L-isulfides, protects against stomach cancer, boosts immunity. You've heard about people eating garlic to help so that they don't get sick. You guys know why that works, right? Because nobody can stand to be around them, so they don't get any germs. But truly, it does help, okay? It's really actually important. And back in the day, was it the Black Plague? There were doctors wandering around trying to help people, right? And they discovered that there were some groups of people that didn't get sick. And they were trying to figure out, so even back in the day, they had thoughts and trying to figure out why and why not things were happening. And they started noticing that the people that didn't get sick had hung their onions and garlic in their kitchens to dry from their gardens, okay? And though the people that had those weren't getting as sick or sick at all, as opposed to people that hadn't hung anything in their kitchens. Okay, so even hanging something was making a difference back in the day. So we went to my folks' place for Christmas a few years back, and a bunch of people were getting colds, and so what did my dad do? He went out to the store and bought a big bag of onions, and he cut onions in half, and we had a dish of onions in every room. You know, fresh onions, house smelled like onions, but less people got sick. It really worked. So something to think about, but getting it internally, that's a good thing too. Now, when I was a kid, onions were like poison to me, but for some reason, I think my taste buds have changed as I've gotten older, and I can handle onions now. Okay, so some things to think about with making sure we have some white things in our diet too. So again, colorful things. I had a lot more pictures from my garden, but I should have put them on when I was at home or in the cafeteria, because I just had trouble with the connections to get them in. But this picture is in Bhutan again. 2 kinds of potatoes. Okay, potatoes contain, if I can say it right, glutathione, a powerful antioxidant. You know how some people say potatoes, you shouldn't eat potatoes, they're not good for you? They're very good for you. There are people back in the Depression days that's all they ate was potatoes, and they survived very well. Because potatoes have vitamin C, they have all kinds of phytochemicals that are good for you. The problem we have with the potato is what we put on the potato that makes it bad for us. So if you bake the potato, that's one of the best ways, because you still have everything in the potato. But if you stack that big pat of butter on it and a whole bunch of sour cream and a whole bunch of bagel bits or whatever they're called and all kinds of other stuff, that's what the problem is, okay? So think about how you're eating them and how you're making them. By the way, as far as potatoes go, this year we planted 7 different kinds of potatoes in our garden. So last year I think we had 6. This year we added another one for curiosity to see how it is. This is from our garden too. Tomatoes and green onions and cucumbers. There's so many interesting things. Now, people have said, well, here in Newfoundland it's hard to have a garden because it's very rocky soil. Yes, I can understand that, but there's ways to do container gardens, even having potatoes in container gardens, okay? So there's ways to get the soil that you need for the gardens, for your gardens to grow. Even if you just have a little bit, or just start with having herbs. Herbs are quite easy to grow too. This year I decided to do parsley. I don't usually plant parsley, but I like parsley, and I cannot believe how well it's growing. So I thought, why haven't I done this before? And same with garlic. I don't know if I have a garlic picture in here or not, hopefully. Here's a good variety in the market in Bhutan. Cauliflower and tomatoes and just a whole variety of things to purchase or to even grow. But there's so many things you can purchase that's helpful too, okay? Lots of varieties. Broccoli, cauliflower, all kinds of things. Let's just make sure we add dried fruits and nuts. Dried fruits are good to have, but we have to remember the fact that they are dried, which means that you shouldn't have too much of it, because if you have let's think about when you eat a peach, for instance. Okay, when you eat a fresh peach, you can eat the whole peach probably easily enough. If you eat some dried peach halves, it's not too hard to keep going past 2 halves. But then you're not lacking the moisture or the water that's in those particular dried fruits, so you need to make sure you drink enough water and not too much of the dried fruit, because you can get extremely constipated with lots of dried fruit and no water. Okay, so just remember, if you have a dried piece of something, what would that come to if it was fresh? Then only eat that much. Okay, and that will help you. Same with the nuts. The amount to eat for the nuts is, they say, a handful. That is not a heaping handful. Okay, so in the morning at home when we have breakfast, we have a whole bunch of jars of different kinds of nuts, and so we take 4 almonds, 1 hazelnut, a couple of Brazil nuts, maybe the equivalent of 1 walnut, so a few different nuts. So it actually is just a little small pile in the palm of your hand, okay? And have that works really well, okay? So too much nuts, like Paul said, you can gain significant weight with too much nuts. So even though they're good for you, too much of a good thing becomes a problem. Beans, peas, and lentils, that's the pulses. They're called the pulses. So when you read in the Bible with Daniel, they wanted to eat pulses. That's what it was, beans, lentils, and peas. And that's usually the dried varieties, okay? An interesting thing about the Daniel story is you know that it wasn't just the 10 days that they were eating healthy, right? They had been eating healthy all their life. So the 10 days just was the trial period. But if they had just eaten 10 days and healthy and hadn't, it would have made a difference, but not the difference that's connected. So remember, you need that whole length of time to be eating healthfully. So many things you can do with beans, peas, and lentils. Now, remember that some people have a hard time digesting these foods, okay? And so there are different ways to help cook them or help them be more palatable or not so gassy for you and whatnot. And one of the things is if you soak them, dump that water, soak them again, dump that water, then fresh water to cook them. That helps quite significantly. And interesting, some ethnic groups who they start their babies on beans. I mean, they don't start their babies on applesauce like we do. They start with beans. Like in Central America and Mexico, they never have problems with bloating with beans because their ethnic background, you know, is different than a white person's background, and so you're able to digest that in a different way. So it's just interesting to think about. I was going to try to throw, yes, sorry. Yeah, that's a good way to go. I'll mention it here. Whoops, sorry. So if you soak the beans, lentils, peas till they sprout, and then cook them after that, that's a good way to do it too. And very healthy, actually, to do it that way. Another thing, actually, I just thought of is the quinoa. Some people are discovering they have trouble digesting or having significant trouble with quinoa. And I recently found out or read an article that tells that you should actually soak your quinoa, wash your quinoa really well, but soak it and dump that water because there's a coating on there that actually is very harmful for you. So we all should be doing that whether we're having trouble with quinoa or not. So we should be washing it extremely well, soaking it, dumping that water, and then then cooking it. And quinoa cooks up really fast, and it's easy to use in many different things. Like I said, I was going to try to show a picture of my garden because I thought you'd be interested, but I couldn't get it transferred over. But preserving food is a good way to think about getting the food from your garden or fresh from the farmer's market. A good way to actually have the better nutrients, even from the grocery store. Sometimes you can, you know, they're having specials in. We live close to BC, but most times we don't get to BC to get that good fruit. But sometimes in just the regular grocery store, they'll have a special on the peaches that came from BC this summer. And it's like, oh, so we'll buy a couple cases and then I'll put them up for preserves, canning them, and then you've got these beautiful peaches that have no sugar or the amount that you don't want, because when you buy it in the store, it just doesn't taste the same as when you make your own. So consider that. This is some chutney I decided to make because we had so many tomatoes, and so I thought, well, let's try a different recipe, and it turned out really well. So Paul's going to pass these out quickly. Somebody maybe can help him on one side or the other. We want to talk a little bit briefly here about now, you can actually get vegetarian plates. This is the one that we're handing out, is the Canada Food Guide, which is very excellent now. They've done a really good job. It's really back down what it should be. But you can get a vegetarian plate guide. You can get a vegan plate guide. So if you're ever interested, just go online and see what some of them are. I'm not sure how they all are. but just kind of interesting. So just kind of briefly go through this with you. So you'll notice it's easier for people to visualize what to eat if you put it on a plate rather than just list them. So you'll see that the plate is in half. The left side is fruits and vegetables and lots of different colors. Okay? So when you think about the plate that you're having at lunch today, dinner or lunch or supper, start looking, or at home, think about it. Is half your plate fruits and vegetables? Okay? Then we need some protein foods, but notice it's only a quarter of the plate. And then some whole grain foods, and it's only a quarter of the plate. Okay, so what's most important? Fruits and vegetables. How are you doing? How are you doing with fruits and vegetables? And you'll notice on the second page of it, it gives you a little bit more information of how to do this. It says, be mindful of your eating habits. Cook more often instead of eating out. Okay? Enjoy your food. Eat meals with others, which would probably help you slow down in your eating. Reading food labels is extremely important. And I don't have time to get into how you can look at a label and decide how much teaspoons of sugar is in it. But there's different, you can go online and find the formulas for just, you could quickly figure out how many teaspoons of sugar are in a particular food by looking at the label. It's an easy calculation. So different ways that are important, and just briefly I want to talk about looking at it in terms of a measuring cup. Okay, so vegetables should be 2.5 cups a day. This is a 2-cup measure. So this, a little, almost full, would be how many vegetables you should eat a day. Interesting, huh? What about fruits? You should have 2 cups of fruit a day. That's up to here. Are you eating 4 cups a day? That's why sometimes it's good to do the gardening, or you look what fruit is in season. So you're working on the idea of what's the cheapest in your store at the moment. Okay? So it actually isn't that hard, because if you put in here, if you cut up an orange and cut up a banana and maybe put a few blueberries, that's probably almost 2 cups. So it isn't as much as it seems, but I thought that would be interesting to look at. Okay? And so one other thing, pay attention to the portion sizes. So the one I want to bring forward to you is cheese. Okay, hard cheese. Let's say cheddar cheese. Do you know how big the serving size, one serving size of cheddar cheese is? Everybody knows what a dice is when you play games? That is 1 serving. How much are you eating on those Adventist haystacks? I bet it's more than 1 dice. So you can understand why we could gain weight by eating food that is actually, well, cheese isn't good for us. It really shouldn't be eaten, but regardless. You can see why even if we're eating good food, if we're eating too much of it, we're still going to gain weight. So it's push back, 80% full only, and it'll help us significantly. Okay, so our homework is, wherever the homework is, let me just do the text. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So let's do that. Let's start eating healthier. There's always something we can all do. So our homework is, there's a sleep disorder and a stress profile.
So on these forms, the stress profile will not be discussed tomorrow, but I'm starting to get a head start on this because of the computer issues we had last night. It's not that you can't do it if you get it tomorrow, but do the stress profile, and on the sleep disorder one, put your name on there. So you're going to get 2 forms here. We shall collect, and be clear in what you're circling here, because You made me guess with a few of them yesterday because you put this range on there and I'm like, I don't know what that means, so I'll average it.
So again,